Welcome to EdUp Curriculum. I am your host, Nicole Poff, and I know I always say this, but I'm really excited about today's guest, Dr. Jay Keehn. Him and I have spoke a couple of times, and he just is very passionate about this field and just the environment around us and how things are changing, campus closures. We'll unpack a lot of his kind of passion projects throughout this episode, but to know Dr. Keehn is a gift, truly. Just a very, very, very kind person. So I'm excited to jump in. Dr. Keehn, thank you so much for being here with us. Before we begin, what do you want us to know about you? Can you share a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So when you talk about passion, higher education is my passion. For 18 years, I was working at an institution, climbing the administrative ladder. I started as faculty in the Masters of Education program, moved up to director. During my time as director, we had two state-based programs, one in Florida, which is where I reside, and one in Vermont. I oversaw both, but during that time, I also was tasked with building a completely online program, a completely online delivery model. So I went from directing two traditional Masters of Education programs, although not so traditional. We also had a lot of independent study built into that, and transforming it to a third option of completely online from scratch, developing or picking out, identifying the learning management system, hiring staff that was tech savvy, and so forth. And we're going to talk about university finances, or at some point, but there was a point where the university was struggling, a little bit at that point.
Sure.
Not so much to the point of closure then. That came much later. But the university decided that one of the programs that needed to sunset was the Masters of Education program. The president at that time, not the last president, the president at that time, approached me, and knowing my background prior to coming to the university, I had various experiences in both higher ed. I was a staff member and professor at a community college before my move to Florida, and a lot of other experiences in education and mental health counseling. I started my own charter school. A year later, I learned a lot of lessons from closing that charter school. Um, and so I had like all these experiences in that umbrella of student services, in education, counseling, building, being an entrepreneur. And he says to me, the president says to me, we're shutting the MED. However, we never, it was the 50th year of the university at that point, and we never had an office of student services. And he knew that I was very interested in that, in providing the services and seeing students succeed. We had a secretary out of Vermont overseeing ADA. We had, tutors who were working on their own and getting students, but there was no mainstreaming of them. There was no oversight. There was not even data collected for it. And so he asked me, he said, can you bring it all in? It was also at the same time that our career services, which was being outsourced at that time, had to go away. The company that was providing the career services stopped providing the services, right? And our contract was over. So he asked me if I wanted to bring it internally. So now have all these services, and I bring it all under one Office of Student Success. And for the remaining time at the university, I was associate dean and dean of the Office of Student Services. However, I should say that there was a year in there, a year and a half in there, that I left the student services to be executive director of one of the campuses, in which I oversaw enrollment, the facility management, a lot of the business side of that specific campus. But then I went back to being the dean of student success, is what we called it. And my portfolio was academic tutoring, supplemental instruction, veterans affairs, career services, which I said we had to start up again from scratch, ADA services, which I, given my background and my experiences, one of the places I worked at was a medically fragile hospital, basically, for kids, where I was the education director. And so I had a lot of experience in that. My master's in school psychology, and so I had no staff under me for that. So all the other programs, I had coordinators, I had directors. We brought the library services under my portfolio, um, and mental health counseling, which is another thing I'll get to in a second on how we did that. And so now I had this larger portfolio of student services under my purview. And that's where my background is. Like I said, there was a lot of earlier experiences. I touched on some of that, but 18 years at this university prior to its closing.
Awesome. You're like a Swiss Army knife. You got all these little widgets that can kind of spin off in
Yeah,
different
I mean
directions.
that's true, but it's all directed toward student success.
Totally. Yep. And what I always love about our conversations is how we can talk about how all of these things can inform the curriculum, right? A lot of times these support services live over here and
Mm-hmm.
curriculum lives over here, and the two worlds are separate, right? And it's students, you need to go to your career advisor. Students, you need to go to your student advisor. But we know
Mm-hmm.
that they're busy. We know there's a lot going on in the student life. And so, something I love about talking with you is you see that bigger picture of we need to embed all of these services into the curriculum. So,
Yes.
let's talk about that. One of the bigger challenges in higher ed is that siloed approach, right? Many of these student services, advising, career support, mental health are really separate and siloed from the curriculum, which leaves our students to seek it out on their own. So, what's your vision for embedding these services directly into the curriculum?
Yeah, so like you say, most universities, and some of this has, you know, weaned a little bit. Universities have awoken to the need to combine or build a bridge, but most universities still have like the two parts: student affairs and academic affairs. And then, they build bridges. How do they build the bridges? They connect the two silos by saying in the curriculum, whether it's on the syllabus, whether it's the professor, reminding the students, or whether it's actual links on an online course page, right? They say we have this service, right? You need to go to the library to help to having a librarian help you with research. You need to go to tutoring and get help with your writing skills, right? You should go to the career center. So it's a bridge. It's the academic affairs talking about the student services, and this is what we have. What I envision is that you don't need a bridge because they're in the same space, right? What I envision is one land where both student services and academic affairs live, right? And so, again, what you were talking about, advising, career services, mental health counseling, tutoring, ADA services, which is a little harder to embed, but could be done, is all there with the academic side. And we can discuss how we go about doing
Absolutely. And I think this is the way that universities will win. I just think there's a lot of reluctance there. Um, why some people will say no, right? Some people will say academic affairs needs to stay where it is,
that.
student
Mm-hmm.
affairs needs to stay where it is. So let's really unpack it. Why is it no longer just simply enough to offer these services and let academic affairs do their own thing on the curriculum side?
Right.
What's the case here for embedding these?
All right. Well, first, let me address one of the things you said about, they say no. Right? Certainly in higher education, and you have professors and faculty who've been doing it their way for decades. And they are, in higher ed, it's very known for them to be resistant to change. They want it their way. They don't want anyone intruding on their space, right? So you have that to deal with. But to answer your primary question on that, it's no longer enough because the students aren't going to it. right? Either they don't know about it, either they see it on a syllabus and they said, "Oh, that's not for me." They don't recognize that they have a need, right? So the students aren't going to the services, so the services have to come to them.
Yep.
So that's first off, right? Secondly, I would say that it works as a preemptive intervention for students who start to see a little struggle along the way. They're in the class, they're doing okay, but maybe they're at a B or C level and they don't do so well in the next exam or the next paper, and all of a sudden it's getting closer to the end of the semester and they start waking up. Oh, I need this help. Where do I get the help? How do I do this? Right? Whereas if it's there in front of them at the beginning, they see what is available to them right away. Right? And if it's embedded immediately, then they're going to be there getting the help. So perhaps, and we're going to discuss this also, but perhaps the professor has a writing center tutor, let's say, come in and review all papers from all students preemptively. And that's part of embedding,
Yep.
right? And then the third is if it brings more success to the students, if they see that it's there for them, right? Then they'll have more motivation and more purpose in doing what they do for it. So again, on the writing center example or any kind of tutoring, they get into help. They see that they're going, the grades are getting up. They're more motivated to keep going. But another example would be even career services. Depending on how that gets embedded, right? You can have students in a course that are realizing, wait, this course is connected to what I really want to do, right? Again, you may not have it in every single course, but it should be in every, or courses within every program, right? And so if a student then sees that that specific course, that language of the course, that but the buzzwords are there, the assignments are connected, right? It's really right there embedded. The faculty and the career counseling services are working together to put this into the course, right? Then they are more. The student might be more motivated to keep going because they'll see it's really for my outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, we assume that students understand how their curriculum connects to the real world, but
Mm-hmm.
really we need to show them. I remember when I worked in career services, so many students would come and they would say, I have this job description in front of me and it needs all these skills that I don't have. This degree didn't prepare me for that. And so we'd go through item by item and I'm like,
Right.
what are you talking about? You need critical thinking skills. Let's think about all the case studies you did in your program, right? Those case studies really utilize your critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
But because we didn't draw that line directly, they didn't see it, right? They just
Right.
saw it as homework versus building a skill.
Right. And I would say when you say that we assume that the students know that it's connected to the career outcomes, to their goals, it's also us, the higher ed professionals, the academic affairs, certainly the ones that have been there for many years and don't want to change their ways. It's also them saying, well, they should know. They chose the major. They chose what they want. So they're taking my course for that reason, right? So it's the students making the assumption, but it's also part of us making that same assumption.
Totally, totally. Again, when I was in career services, I sent a 4.0 student to an interview. Brilliant, brilliant student. I only sent one student to an interview because I was like, this student's going to nail it. And when I called the doctor after, I was for medical assistant. When I called the doctor after, he said, she was wonderful, but I can't hire her. And I said, why? And he said, she came to the interview in a mini skirt, in flip flops, in a low cut top. And I remember being like, why would she do that? So I called the student and I said, how did it go? And she said, it was awesome. I spent all of my last money buying the best outfit, but it's
Mm-hmm.
worth it. And I think I crushed it. She had absolutely zero idea that
Right.
what she was wearing was not professional. She literally spent all of her money on that outfit that cost her the job, but
Mm-hmm.
we made the assumption that she knew what professional attire was.
Yeah, and without that input from career services, the faculty or whomever is going to make that kind of assumption. If you want, right now might be a good time to talk about how we go about embedding, specifically that example, career services. There are others into the curriculum.
Yep.
And one of the things I think is important is not to say, okay, this is, coming from the dean, the vice president, we're going to start embedding this. You really need the program chairs and the faculty to determine what's the best way. And for example, we made sure that every student had an opportunity or was actually mandated to visit with the career counselor. Most of our academic programs chose to take one course and say you have to meet with a career counselor. It's part of the course. You're going to get an assignment for your course to do it. Some of our academic programs, psychology for one, said no, one's not enough. We want you to have several. Right? They had two, I believe, one in the first course and one in the last psychology course. The first course is what is career services? What are you doing? What's your goal? What's the field of psychology? And the second one was how you go on an interview where you're getting to that stage, you're done with your program. And then having that input with the faculty and the department chairs was also helpful for a program like criminal justice. Where I was, criminal justice, we were more non-traditional. Most of our students, and certainly in criminal justice, all of our students were returning adults. They all had their police credentials already, right? They were all moving forward. They needed the credits. They needed to complete their degree in order to move up in the chain of law enforcement. They didn't need career services. They didn't need to be told what to do. They didn't need to know how to go on interviews, any of that. So it was good that we partnered with the criminal justice department to say, okay, you don't need to have your students embedded in in career services. You don't need to have them meet with a counselor as part of the academic program. But what we did do was have our career counseling department develop a webinar on saying this is where you are in your police, life. This is where you are in your career. How do you get to the next step? What do you need? How do you go about, your courses or find out the courses that you need for finishing up? What are the buzzwords that, that from the experiences that you had that you can take? So they had a webinar that they were able to attend each semester. Right. I mean, they only had to do it once, but it was offered each semester.
Yep.
But they didn't need to have that one-on-one because they were at a position where they didn't need to change careers or redo. They knew what they were doing already.
Totally. And I think that's that career service advice that we need, right? Like our faculty are experts in the content,
Mm-hmm.
the knowledge that the students need to know. I look at career services as being experts in their field, right? Just the same way that the faculty are career services is. And they can say, this, in my opinion, everyone always needs career support,
Right.
right? An extra pair of eyes on your resume will never hurt. It just helps. So even when people are established in their career, there, in my opinion, is always a way, but it looks like you just said it's very different than the support we give the 18-year-old students
Right.
who are fresh out of high school
Right.
and now on this path.
Right. And by the way, there's services. Handshake is one of them
Mm-hmm.
that provide career services. It's a supplement to what you might have on campus, right? It also provides job listings and so forth. It's great. However, after we tried it, we noticed that it wasn't really the best fit for our students. So even with what services you offer, you have to make sure that it works best for your students. We were returning adults. We had most people in their careers, some who were career changing, some who were trying to move up and go career enhancement, some who just wanted to finish their degree. But they didn't need so much the handshake. They needed more than one on one. There were people who were rusty because they were out of school for so long and first coming back. So they kind of needed more of the one on one. So even when you are assessing what is the best way of doing this, not all tools fit for your student population.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that because I think a lot of times we look at these, embedding types initiatives as checking boxes. We'll say, yep, we need to embed curriculum or career services in curriculum. We got handshake check, right? And then we
Right.
never circle back to look at analytics and
Mm-hmm.
see, what services are our students using within Handshake, because then we can really narrow down what services our students are using.
Right. And that failure to not go back and assess and look at the analytics is a failure on not providing the appropriate services and leaving the students out there for themselves. But it's also a failure of investment. If you're investing in something like a handshake or like hiring, a team of career counselors, and you may not need all of them, or they may not be specializing in what you have, then you're spending money on something that's not effective for you. It's not impactful for your university or for your students, and it goes to another point that we'll talk about is the college finances and return on investments. If you're not looking at the analytics, if you're not making data driven decisions, then that all adds into that play.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, in higher ed, we get really distracted by shiny objects. And the sales guy will come in for a new ed tech tool or a new career services tool or a mental health tool, right? And they're like, your students must have this. And our eyes get big and we're like, oh, yeah, we have to have that, right? Because we see all the other institutions having it. But I
Yep.
think to your point is that can be a really big waste of money if we don't actually think about what problem are we trying to solve
Right.
and is this the appropriate solution?
Right. Exactly. And to further our discussion is we don't try to see what that problem is trying to solve, right? Or what that product can bring to us. We also don't involve academics in that decision and program advisors in that decision and the IT folks in that decision. Then if it's singular in who's making that decision, if it's just cabinet level people, then and not the people on the ground working with the students, then that's also a big problem that we've seen in higher ed.
Absolutely. So now we've talked a lot about, I think this is a good shift for us. So we've talked about a lot of student success, right? Like why this matters for the student.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you and I have talked about and what I think might be missing from the current conversation is there's institutional impact here too, right? Like this doesn't only benefit the student. So let's kind of unpack. What are some of the institutional benefits of embedding services into the curriculum?
Yeah. So students who feel motivated, who feel that they have purpose, who feel that they have a sense of belonging, right? Strayhorn talks about that a lot. Students who have a sense of belonging at the college are more successful, right? They have a higher completion rate, a higher retention, higher persistence, graduation, right? And if we can embed services into the courses, that leads to all these data points, right? But what it really also does is it can also, or it could also do, is help with enrollment, right? If you're an enrollment counselor and you're out there saying, "Oh, you want to be a business major? We got that program here. Sign up." But if you're a enrollment counselor and you go, "Oh, you want to be a business major? We have that program, but we also have in that program, there's some writing that we do, but you'll also have to meet with a writing tutor, right? There's career counselors that come in. Oh, you've identified to me that you may have a disability, and that's a very important way of saying it because you as a professional can't say you might have a disability, but if the student themselves say that, well, we have so and so ADA services, and the faculty work to implement those interventions, to implement those accommodations, right? So if you are the enrollment counselor, right? And you're out there sharing this picture of this is not just a business class. This is a class that's going to give you these experiences. This is for your life, right? Some programs might have a supplemental instruction program. What I mean by that is I've developed in a couple of our programs, in our early childhood program, where students who took those courses with those professors were actually sitting in again with the class, knowing in advance what the assignments were, knowing in advance what the exams were like, how the teachers taught, how the textbook or what readings were more important, how to skim through it, or how to pull out the more pertinent information. So you had a supplemental instructor in the class with you. And so if enrollment counselors, if the marketing team puts this in marketing, right? full services embedded in your courses, then I think what will happen is obviously, enrollment will grow, retention, like I said before, will grow, and academic reputation can grow, right? Especially depending on how they market it, right? And we've seen, we mentioned college closures. We've seen that one reason that college closes, probably not the main reason, but one reason, is the academic reputation, or people thinking of the value of higher education as diminished. And this is not political. This is not what's happening now with loss of grants and what have you. This is happening for years. And um, and so if you can build a program, if you can build a college whereby that academic reputation is there, then you won't have students leaving. You won't. It will certainly impact your overall finances and your overall finances, and may happen to help you avoid being on that path of either closure or merger. And lastly, if you do, for other reasons, get onto that path, which is something we can talk about, then you're more attractive to other colleges to maybe share services. I'm a very big proponent of colleges working together, sharing services, merging and developing systems amongst colleges. There's a couple in the country right now that are building their systems throughout, and they're very successful. Um, and so being attracted by opening these opportunities, by having these, should help you avoid being on that path. But if you're on that path, you can share services and work together with other universities.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to kind of your point number 2 when you talked
Sure.
about the institutional growth. I think one thing that schools are really not recognizing the value of is student referrals, right? So enrollment gets a student through the door, says we
Mm-hmm.
have all these wonderful support services. This is what your classroom is going to be like. And there's kind of two things that happen. Either A, that happens for the student and what the enrollment advisor told them becomes accurate,
Mm-hmm.
or B, which I think is more the case for institutions, is we think that we do all these things well, but we're not actually doing them
Right.
well. And so the student gets in class and they're like, this isn't what my enrollment advisor told
Mm-hmm.
me it would be. And so then the enrollment advisor comes back and says, hey, Dr. Keehn, how's it going in class? Do you know anyone that you might want to enroll? And that student's like, heck no,
Right.
you, I don't even want to be here, right? But I think the opposite of that is true.
Right.
If students are thriving in their classes because they have the support they need, when that enrollment advisor calls and says, Dr. Keehn, who else do you know? You're like, let me open up my phone because I know 10 other people
Mm-hmm.
who would really value from this model,
Right.
right? Who would really benefit.
And with all the data showing in marketing that no matter how much you spend, and you should spend accurately, appropriately, based on data driven decisions and so forth, the number one marketing tool is still word of mouth, right? It is still having college students going back to their high school and saying my college is this and wonderful. But if you're not providing what you're saying you're providing, if you are not providing the services, well, the students don't even know about the services, then they're not going, like you said, they're going to go, heck no, don't come to this college.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, too, a lot of schools assume that, let's say they have a master's level, they're like, we're going to open a doctorate level of this same type of
Mm-hmm.
program and we're going to funnel our master's graduates up. And they start making those calls. And the students are like, I had a terrible experience. I'm not going to get my doctorate from you guys, right? But there was this assumption made of, oh, let's just capitalize. Capitalize is not a great word. Let's just make this program so that we can take the graduates from this master's program,
Right.
offer them a doctorate, and that all of them will come back. And then it's like crickets.
Right.
And
They assume it's an automatic feeder.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But if we're not doing these other, and it's like a spiral effect, we have to get it right here. We have to
Right.
get it right in the support systems we're offering the students in the classroom. And then I really do, and I think you and I are on the same page here, believe that everything else just kicks into place after that.
Right. For sure.
Awesome. Okay. So we already talked about institutional benefits. We talked about how this can be competitive advantages. let's talk about kind of some tactile examples, right? We've been a little bit theoretic. We've woven in some examples, but really let's get tactile with this.
Yes.
Have you seen any examples where an institution um, embeds their services and it leads to measurable improvements like persistence, graduation,
Mm-hmm.
career placement?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that can be done. What we saw at the very beginning of changing a probation policy and getting academic affairs involved, right? And when I started on the student services side, I shamefully admit that our probation policy was woeful. It was horrible. Basically, it said you would get a letter and said your GPA dropped below 2.0,
Hmm.
and if you don't get it up by the end of the semester, you're out. You are out. And so what we what I did was, I thought I was horrible also because of timing. By the time we got the previous grades and the new GPA, they were already 2 weeks into the next semester, and there's only 8 weeks. How can they? We were setting them up for failure rather than success. So I changed the whole probation policy with my vice president. We worked together on this. It was great, and we developed an academic review protocol. Sorry, academic recovery protocol for the students, and we put that in the curriculum. And we said, you're below GPA, you're below 2.0. You need to go tutoring once a week. You need to, and we provided the services, right? You need to go to library research. I'll tell you, we also put in there, you need to have a session with our financial literacy department or financial aid, because if you fail a course, it really impacts what that is. They don't know that. It's another service that they should need to know. And financial literacy overall, we did webinars continuously on that topic. And so what we saw was, and I'm getting to making this from the students on probation to a more general, but what we saw was just the students who went on probation for the first 3 semesters after we put in this policy and after we embedded it, 100% of them stayed the following semester. Now, part of that is we gave them that time. Before we said you had to be out by the end of the first semester. Now we said you had 3 semesters to, so even if they didn't get their grades up above the 2.0, they still were in there. But then, like I said, it was 3 semesters. So at some point, you would expect that to drop. But it wasn't, because what was now happening was that they were seeing, oh, I can go up a little bit. I can go up a little bit. Oh, now I'm above 2 point. I'm off probation. I have, and like I said before, it helps them with self motivation. It gives them the confidence. They see they can do it. So then we said, okay, now we got to do this for in general. So we made sure that in many of the programs, every student, and we were more writing intensive than exams anyway, but we made sure that every student had to, or every undergraduate student, before when I said every student with the Career Center, I meant every student. This is every undergraduate student had to have a session with the Writing Center, regardless of, if they were coming in with great writing skills, or they were struggling, or they only needed help with grammar, or they only needed help with research, and maybe we would send them to the library, to one of the librarians, right? But we put that in there, right? And what we saw was writing skills increased, right? Grades increased, right? And ultimately retention increased, right? I want to be clear that 100% number was on specifically those probation students, but overall retention numbers started to increase. Career services, like I said, we made sure that every student had a session, but and some did two, some programs did one. We had the, it was very important for us to make sure that we had the partnership with the academic affairs, with the department chairs. And when the program chair said we don't need the one-on-one, we made sure to have that. But we also did other webinars. And we did webinars, and these were either promoted in the class, some programs made it a mandatory to go to these webinars, and made them have an assignment, write up a summary about it. But then we also started making those a little bit more specific. Embedding services isn't only about the student success part of passing the grades or going to get the career services. It's about the individual person, right? And so we made career service buzzword videos for veterans. Now you're going
Hmm.
back, right? We made videos for the LGBTQ plus community, right? We made webinars for first generation. That was a very big one when we talked about success, when we talked about retention, because a lot of them, like traditional students coming from high school, they are moving from dependent to independent, right? In high school, they're given their books. They don't have to go buy it themselves. They're told what courses and where to go. They don't have to pick them out themselves. They don't, most in most cases, and certainly in public schools, they don't have to pay for it. Now they have to go take out loans, right? So there's this whole new transition. And even for the adult learner who hasn't been in college in so long, a lot of the processes have changed, right? Some of these students who were registering with us remember going to the registrar's office with a booklet, and now their whole system changed. Now they have to go online. They have to be tech savvy. They have to understand where to do this, right? And so the same thing with the first generation, because you take those students, and not because of a lack of desire, but they may not have the correct or accurate supports. If they're first generation in their family might be proud, but they also may not understand what the student is going through because they never went through it themselves. So embedding isn't just about, here's your career services, go there once a semester. Here's tutoring. Here's this. Oh, you're struggling. This is what you have to do in order to get off of probation, right? Early alerts. It's we see that you're doing well. You're starting to tutor. Let's catch you beforehand. But it's also about providing the services. And then lastly, with that is when we're talking about providing the student life, the whole picture is the mental health piece. Now we chose to outsource that. We chose to connect with a telehealth um, company who was providing mental health services free for any student, unlimited. Typically, the company, obviously, if you went to this company, you would have to pay for it. You would have a certain amount of sessions. Here, we were able to write a grant, work with them, get the money externally. So we talked about return on investment. It wasn't our investment, but obviously, I wouldn't know every semester. I wouldn't know who went and who used the services because of confidentiality. Although one time a student did write me a whole long email on how her life changed because of it. So obviously it was disclosed to me, and that was very made me feel really good because I felt all right. The services that we're embedding, the services that we're paying for, this student, and I'm sure based on the numbers. I mean, the first semester we offered it, we had 150 students sessions. I don't know if it was exactly students, but sessions of it. And what we did with that was we had a short video of why it's important to have well-being.
Mm.
Not when you're ready and you're struggling and you need to adjust or your anxiety or you're going through divorce, your family members sick, but beforehand, well-being. Why it's important to meet with a counselor, to go through what you need with your life, what's going on in your life. Maybe you are taking this course for the first time or taking a schooling for the first time in a long time. You may need help adjusting to that. You're going through a lot. We made a short video on that and put it on every single course homepage in our learning management system. So those are just some tangible ways.
That's
I'm sorry if I went too far.
Oh, no, you're great. I think that's important too. What I really took kind of from that last example is that the language is really important that we use, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well-being versus maybe the stigma of mental health,
Mm-hmm.
but that well-being kind of removes those walls. I also wonder too, and this is just me personally, if first gen, if that labeling of first gen, if we're missing the mark and if students actually know if they're first gen, and here's why I wonder this. I was a first gen student, but I did not know that until after I finished my master's. I would see first gen as an undergraduate at San Diego State. I
Mm-hmm.
would see first gen and everywhere, but I did not know that that was me.
Interesting.
I never, I just, it was a word that I didn't know. I had no idea what it meant. And so I wonder too, is there opportunity to relabel some of these things that makes good sense to us, but maybe they don't
Right.
make sense to our students or our current students. Something else that you talked about too, that I really want to circle back to, is how you were willing to change. Way back, kind of in your first example where you started this, you were willing to change a policy to help students succeed. And I think I want to stop there for a minute because that is a huge distinction and really important because I think we have so many policies, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
whole catalogs of policies. and we're trying to operate within the policies, but how many of those policies are actually really serving our students and how many of them are hurting them? And so I love that you're like, this policy is really not serving our students. So let's reinvent this a little bit so that our students can succeed.
Right.
Um, did you get, and I know I'm going way off the record here
Go
or
for it.
off script, did you get any sort of pushback when you wanted to kind of reimagine how this looked? Because people love policies and they're attached
Right.
to policies.
So first, I'd say I didn't think of it originally as a probation. I had to do the research and get the data of why are we losing so much? Why are our retention students numbers not as good as they should be? Right? And yes, it wasn't only because we were throwing out probation students, but that to me seemed like one that we could avoid. We were saying again that you are now below the grade point average you need, the standard grade point average. So get it up to above the 2.0 before you end the end of the semester. Now, at that point, there was probably only 5 or 6 weeks left in that semester. And if they really struggle, they're at a 1.5. So getting them up to all A's that semester still wouldn't get them to 2.0.
Yep.
And so we really were setting them up for failure. You know, I mentioned before when I started this that I'm ashamed to have looked at that policy and say that that's what we were doing. So it was really started off by what are our numbers? Why are we struggling with retention? And there were other reasons, but this was the one that I felt, wow, we can change this. We can look at it. My first go about wasn't embedding, was to put them in some sort of course that made them enroll in a course. I didn't like the word remedial, but some sort of course that would help them get back on track. And I got pushback from the registrar's office. I got pushback from program chairs, certain program chairs where they were accepting a lot of transfer credits and work or life experience credits were saying, well, my students don't want another class that they have to take. And my first thought was, okay, well, make sure that they do well. So and that drove me later on. But then I had to stop that and say, wait, it's not their fault necessarily. Why are they not doing well? Again, because they're in class for the first time in a long time. They're not having the right supports. You have a lot of adjuncts who come in and teach and then, aren't there for office hours or so forth. Right. So I had to take a step back and also look at why we were having so many students on probation. So I said, okay, if we're not allowed to take it out and offer another course, that's where I got the pushback. I'm going to develop it and bring it internally and make it available. So students who were on probation, regardless of their course, had to still take this academic recovery program. And I'll tell you a little secret. To get off probation, they had to go above the standard grade point average, the 2.0. They now had 2 complete semesters with the possibility of a third to do it. And that criteria was if they were already making progress. So they weren't quite above, but we did see progress. And we did say, and this was very important because we want to be doing this ethically, we did say we want to make sure that they weren't taking classes where they couldn't go above the 2.0, and we knew they would end up failing that criteria, and we were just taking their money,
Yep.
right? As much as that sounds against business side of it, we ethically did not. We had it at the end of every second semester of probation. We made sure that those students who were still making progress can make enough progress to go above their standard GPA, in order that we weren't taking money from students who couldn't do it.
Yep.
Um, so we now had that in place, and students had to do this academic recovery program. Here's the secret again: the academic recovery program made them sign that they would meet with their tutor weekly. They would, if we saw that it was more time management and they were really doing well, we had time management modules and videos that we had to do. They had to go through that. They had to meet with their career counselor, their program advisor every week. And, there was a lot that we made sure. The librarian also, because a lot of a lot of time we heard back that they just didn't know how to do the research. So meeting with our librarians and helping with that. We had a very robust library, and I was very proud of it. So we had all that, and we made that as, you're on probation, you have to do 2 things. You have to go through all this, do the academic recovery program. We connected it had faculty on the committee building the academic recovery program. We specialized it in certain cases where it connected to that major. But the other criteria to get off probation is you had to get above the standard grade point average. And our little secret was that if you got above 2.0, even if you didn't do all the checkpoints of the academic recovery program, we would take you off probation because that means that on your own, you buckled down, you did what you had to do. Maybe you met with some of the career counselors or advisors or whomever that got you on track. Maybe your life just changed. Maybe it was the time management thing and you were dealing with something one semester and you weren't the next semester. So the criteria was really getting back to the 2.0. But we still had to provide that service. We still had to connect, build the bridge with academic affairs, and make sure that happens. And yes, it took change in the policy.
I love that because the policy, and a lot of schools I think don't recognize this. The policy was just leading them to the exit. It's like
Mm-hmm.
students don't get on academic probation by their own choice. No
Right.
student comes in and it's like, I want to get on academic probation and risk losing, getting dropped from the school.
Right.
And so then to assume that in 5 weeks they can self correct is insane, right?
Yeah.
Because whatever was happening in their life is why they were here. And so assuming that 5 weeks is all it's going to take for them to just wake up. So I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of our policies, we're literally shuffling our students.
Right.
Here's the exit, go that way. And I just have to commend you guys for taking such a transformative approach that really puts the students at the center, wraps support around them, which I know we say that a lot, but this really did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also treats them like adults. And I
Right.
love that you said they didn't have to check off every box as long as they hit that 2.0. We're not going to babysit them and make sure that every single silly
Right.
item is checked off. Like the goal is 2.0.
Right.
And as long as they hit it, they're good.
And we didn't necessarily. I mean, we'd be happy if they checked off every box if they were able to do that. But we also kept in mind that these were, in our case, adult students. And adult students, right, are students who have kids, have to go to soccer practice, have to do extracurriculars with them, have to take them to school, right? Have to deal with their health issues, have parents who probably are older, may need some help, may have their own health issues, who themselves are, have their own health issues, have running a household with chores and errands, who have a job, who may in this economy need a second job,
Yep,
right? And yet I just rattled off five aspects of an adult learner and have yet to say study for their own school. So they're
totally.
coming into school and college saying, "Oh, I want to advance my career. I want to do this," but realizing that they're as an adult learner, there's a whole different personality going on with them. And so, yeah, it is all about. It's only about. I shouldn't say it's all about. It's only about setting up students for success. That's
Totally.
all it is.
Jay, have you read the book Commencement?
Of
It's
course.
Joe. You have
Yep. Yep.
the part where it got really, I mean, there were so many parts that opened my eyes, but when they say at best we're the third priority for our students,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, we
Right.
operate like we're their top priority. But yeah, if they're a working adult with a family, then at best we're in that number three spot.
Right.
But more than likely, like you said, we're down five or six.
Right.
Certainly not one,
For
but we
sure.
operate like we are number one.
For sure. And one piece, now that you brought up the book, one that always goes back to my mind, and I'm not remembering the president that quoted this, but he went to his enrollment team and said, if that student is not fit for us, recommend them somewhere else, right? And in this milieu, in this environment, right, where economics are playing such a hardship on so many colleges that students, that enrollment teams are just taking in students. I know we were guilty of it at times, right? There were times where our provost or our vice presidents would come to me and say, are we ready to bring in high school students, more traditional students? I'm like, we don't have the support services for them. We did not design for that. And so he went to his team and said, send them somewhere else. As long as he's sending them to a place that they will succeed,
Yep.
right? And in this environment, I mean, you brought up commencement. That's the one that keeps on repeating in my head.
It's just kindness, right? The
Yeah,
best we can show our students, whether it's a perspective, a current, future, past, is that
right,
we care about them. And
right,
if we are sending them away because they won't succeed with us because a different school is a great fit, then that's being really kind. And in my mind, there's a pretty good chance that that student somewhere down the road is going to say, I went to the school and
Mm-hmm.
they could have taken my money, but they didn't.
Right.
And somewhere down the road, I truly believe there will be a referral or two or five from that student saying, this one wasn't a great fit for me, but I really appreciated how they treated me.
And don't help your admissions numbers by creating a retention problem.
Mm, yep, totally, totally. Now we started to kind of touch about economic part of this. So I want to ask a question because obviously there is a cost to what we're saying, right? We're saying you should embed these services. If they don't exist, get them or embed them. So let's talk about that financial or operation side of embedding services. Does it require additional investment? Is it more restructuring existing resources? What are your thoughts here?
So I look at it this way: the operational side of it is the return on investment. Right? I think you will get a greater return on investment by embedding services into the curriculum. If you're already providing the services, and like I said, there was one service that we didn't have, and I'll go back to that. If you're already providing the services, then you're not investing any more money. If anything, you can save money by partnering with people that you have. I mean, I'm not advocating for reducing staff, but if you have a team of X amount of tutors and you embed into a curriculum where faculty can also work as a tutor or a guide for writing, then maybe you have to analyze what your needs are on that side of it, and you can save some money. Not advocating for that, but there are ways of looking at the embedding from a business perspective where you're saving money and you're not really investing new money. But the return on investment by and like we've said a few times already, by embedding is the students are more successful, they're retaining more, their academic reputation when they go and make referrals, the word of mouth. So, that operational side of it outweighs whatever investment you would make. But like I said, we didn't have mental health counseling as a service. We did a long time ago, and then for other reasons it went away. I at one point tried to take our PsyD department and use them as interns,
Mm,
but the university and the board was against it because of some insurance issues that we might have with them. Understood,
yep,
understood. And at the end, we didn't even have this ID program anymore. Anyway, certainly we were taught, the mental health and well-being for years. A little bit before COVID, then when COVID hit, it became such a big buzzword. You go at that time. You went to NASPA every other and for those who don't know, NASPA is the Association for Student Affairs Professionals. If you went to their conference back even in 2017, 2018, 2019, even leading up to COVID when everyone's anxieties were all over the place, every other presentation was about mental health counseling. It was
yep,
such a big buzzword. And so we tried a few things, and then finally we got connected with a telehealth company, like I said before, right? And through our contract and doing that, we were able to provide free for every student. Actually, the way we were able to do it is every enrolled student. So if you enrolled in February for the summer or the fall, we were actually already to provide that service for you, even if you didn't start classes. It was another thing that we put into our contract. But again, free and unlimited services. But obviously, there's a cost to it. You're asking about investment. Now, in our case, the state of Ohio, which is where our main campus was now offering a grant for all colleges in Ohio, specifically to put toward mental health services. So our provost, very talented, right, went through the whole grant, put it together himself, worked with them, and got the funding to be able to use for this. And until that point, we weren't getting any mental health counseling service. So you're right. It was an investment. It was an investment that, even though we needed, we couldn't do until we had the grant money. I would say this: look what I said about 2 minutes ago. If you're at college and you're struggling, well, even if you're not struggling, if you're about student success, if you're about the whole person, right? And you think you have to put in some extra money um, for services, the return on investment is going to be great. You're going to have, like I said, better retention, better socialization, better engagement, so forth. I'll give you one last example. When our career services um, had to change, we were outsourcing it and then we brought it internally, right? And then there was a point where we had to do the research and say, well, how many students? This was before we embedded it in the curriculum, where we just said we have this. It's on a website. We have it, and we realized we hired someone full time, going out of outsourcing it to bring in someone full time, right? And there was a point where I felt, hey, we need more. But the truth was, I'm looking at the data, I'm looking at whatever, and I said, maybe I shouldn't ask for more because we're not having the students come to it. And it was also at a time where, again, budget wise, Provost said maybe we should need to cut it or cut down to part time or even quarter time, which we did for a little bit until I built it back up to full time. How did I do that? That I did through embedding because once it was embedded, then the students work on it. Then I had the data to say students are going, students are using this, right? Usage goes from up every semester, right? Professors are using it as a resource. They're having webinars on it, or they're making sure that their students go, or they're bringing in the career counselors either in live sessions or on Zoom to talk to the class. And so once I was able to do that, then the data was there and the return on investment was evident.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. We're running out of time, Jay.
Okay.
I want to ask you one more question, though. You've led a lot of really important initiatives and things like that in higher ed. You've made really big impact. What is next for you? What kind of projects, opportunities are you looking forward to take on in this next chapter? What can we expect from you?
Yeah, it's a great question because I do live at that intersection of academics and social and student services. The old, I don't know if you had it, the old Walgreens commercial, living
Mm.
at the intersection of happy and healthy.
Mm-hmm,
Well, the
mm-hmm.
academics are supposed to provide you happiness, supposed to provide you where you're getting your degree, you don't move on in your career, and the student support services with the relationships that you build, advisors, career counselors, the whole picture of your mental health is supposed to be the health. So I live at that corner of happy and healthy, right? Student side and academic side. And so moving forward, I would love to stay there. I would love to work with the university, whether it's directly with the university or what I always say, higher ed adjacent, working with associations, right? Going into schools and helping them as a system, right? Where I can really do what I'm talking about is really helping them either specifically on student services, oversee certain things. I've done that. I've built the student services program. I've also built online programs. And like you said, I was creative. I started a charter school way back. I mentioned that. I also closed it a year later because of finances. I've learned from that, and so experiences, good and bad, you learn from. And so I'm really interested in staying in that path, whether it's either directly working with students or not. The other thing I've been doing is I've been podcasting on college closures. According to the Higher Education Dive, there's been 127 closures since 2016. That's not even in 10 years,
Well,
right? And predictive analysis, certain analysts, Gary Stocker, Matt Hendricks, they do a show each week. Um, they say there's going to be hundreds more, 200 to 300 more in the next 5 years, based on actual data of enrollment, finances, and so forth. That's insane,
yeah, that is.
right? If you look at some of the data from the National Student Clearinghouse, in 2022, they reported 47% of students who have to leave a school because of closure do not return. So we need to make sure that we're working with schools that either A, are more attractive of providing the services, or having a heavy curriculum, a rigorous curriculum that includes the services, so that they are maintaining a budget that fits what they need and are not going down this path, right? It helps with them with marketing, it helps with enrollment, it helps with retention, persistence, and graduation. This all that data is there. But if a school does close, it has to close with dignity. There are some schools that I call failed or failing. They were on the path to failing. They were on the path of having to shut down, and they didn't do anything. They left their students stranded. The students don't have transcripts. They didn't have a teach out plan. They left faculty stranded. They had audits on their federal funds. Right, leadership left. Didn't do anything. Lawsuits from vendors, lawsuits from the facilities. It just went on. And then there are schools who did this successfully. I've learned from my podcasting that there are schools who see that they're on the path, make sure that they have a teach out plan, make sure that every student is taken care of. There's a school that asked the students, where do you want to go? And the president reached out to the president of that other school and made sure that they were taken care of, right? There's schools that put away money and said, okay, we're going to close down in 3 semesters. We have enough money for that. We're not going to purchase this. We're not going to do that, but we are going to keep our students until the very end, right? We're going to pay our faculty, make sure that you have money to pay your faculty, provide health benefits that they signed on for their contract, right? And so there are schools that are doing it right. So that's another part of that question. I'm very much interested in sociology of higher education. How did these schools start? But also how are they closing? Are they closing in with dignity or not? And I'm available to help with that. I feel that that's some area that I can really go in, talk to colleges about, help them with teach out plans, help them with understanding what they need to do to make sure that they close in dignity. And here's another thing that gets forgotten: students who have IEPs or who have ADA plans, right? In the closure, they don't have it anymore. Now they do have
Mm.
it, but it never gets transferred from one college to another. So now they're having to start the process over,
All over again.
right?
Yep.
And so that's just a little bit of an example of how you can provide for your students, even when your business model is not doing well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to watch what unfolds for you. I'm
Thank you.
glad we're connected. I'm glad we're connected on LinkedIn. If anyone isn't connected with you on LinkedIn, I would highly suggest they find you in that space. But I am grateful for the hour you've shared with us, and just I think you're just a great person to have
I
in our
appreciate it.
network
Thank you.
and in higher ed.
Thank you. I would add that every month I also do what I call the club.
Hmm.
I started that just to as part of my time in between jobs here, just to get together with people. I call it the club, Tomorrow's higher education. We sit there, we talk about. It's a small group. We're looking to expand it. Like you say, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, also look up. It's this Friday, March 28th at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Look me up on LinkedIn. I can send you the Zoom information, and we can join us for every month. We get together, we talk. This week, we're talking about what are the new innovations that are going to be disrupting higher ed. I'm sure we'll actually talk some of the politics, unfortunately, of what's happening around the country, and we are also moving toward the conversation, sort of like this, on shared resources from one college to another, and how that can help the future of higher educational landscape as well.
Awesome. That's a great place for people to plug in. Thank you, Jay, so much for being here.
Thank you, Nicole. This has been wonderful.
Yes, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.